Are we actually reducing our carbon output? Okay. How much value does that have? Are we doing it because it's something that's worth doing, or are we doing it to something to fulfill some sort of a federal initiative to be net zero all over the place? Are we actually making any difference in climate? And if we are, fine, go ahead, but support it with facts, not just dreams. Those kinds of decisions just are so frustrating to me and to evidently hundreds and hundreds, and if not thousands, of Edmontonians. So let's get that fixed.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dialogue Over Division. And today I have with me Doug Main. Doug Main is in Edmonton with me, and he's involved with an organization called PACE, and that stands for Principal Accountable Coalition for Edmonton. I like all the words. This has to do with a municipal initiative in Edmonton, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it. I had an opportunity to hear Doug speak last week, and I'm excited to learn a lot more. So, Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you. Maybe if you could just start with a brief introduction of who on earth you are.
Thanks, Eva. I'm the VP of Communications for PACE, and I'll explain all what that entails as we go forward. My background is in broadcasting, politics, and communications and advertising. I guess most notably, and you see the picture in the background, I was elected in 1989 to the provincial legislature and was appointed to Don Getty's cabinet in 89 as the Minister of Culture. Served one term and then went off back to broadcasting and a variety of other endeavors. I was pretty much retired and playing pickleball full time when the opportunity to do something about what's going on in City Hall emerged through the provincial legislation, Bill 20, which started a pilot project here in Edmonton and in Calgary aimed at allowing for the establishment of political parties to contest the mayoralty and city council votes. And it seemed to me that this was a glorious opportunity to do a couple of things. I had long felt that there was a need to, I don't want to say proselytize or evangelize, but communicate to Edmontonians why it's critically important to have common sense, fiscally prudent, business-friendly, growth-oriented, middle-of-the-road, common sense, practical people on council and in the legislature to make the kind of decisions that will deliver value for our tax dollars, provide a common sense approach to solving some of the complex problems that are out there, and be accountable to civilians and the citizens and the voters who put them into office. And with this opportunity to do this municipally, starting from pretty much a clean piece of paper, I jumped in. Sheila Femister, who was our president and who you also, I believe, met at our event the other night, has been tireless in putting this together. She came to it through a couple of initiatives. One was the kind of stealth, surreptitious backdoor effort to change Edmonton's River Valley into a national park. Now, you could argue that that would be a good thing, but without having the citizens' initiative and having the experience I had in the legislature talking to the MLAs from both Jasper and Banff and Waterton and elsewhere, when you have a national park as the bulk of your constituency, trying to get things done involves talking to a whole bunch of bureaucrats in Gatineau, not necessarily the folks in the town. And it would have been a nightmare, and it was kind of done backdoor here. Sheila fought tirelessly to get that spiked, and there was a private members bill that got passed, and so that's done. And she also was involved in the hearings for the new zoning bylaw in Edmonton. And that was an 8 or 9 day exposition of how council and the administration have a plan and don't really much care what the citizens think about that plan. I mean, there was an overwhelming opposition to some of the things that they were proposing, but I, I wasn't there, but I get the sense that it was generally poo-pooed by both the admin and by the majority of councillors. And so now we've got this huge densification issue. Anyway, having said all that, we've got an opportunity in Edmonton to do something about it, and PACE is the vehicle that we're going to use.
You so much to touch on here. Specifically, you mentioned some of the initiatives that it was Sheila, right? The founder? Yeah, that undertook. And so I just want to touch on that for a minute because I'm trying to help elevate how powerful that can be. Just one lady who took initiative herself to do something about a problem that she thought was a problem. And you talked about the grassroots efforts she put in and how it actually made change. It affected change. She had a private members bill go through the legislature. So there was I didn't hear too much about it, but from what I heard, there was some encroachment from the federal government onto municipal lands. And then the province was able to come in and stop it. And I didn't recognize that Sheila was instrumental in that. And that just goes to show how much one person can do. And so from my understanding here now is Sheila and yourself and this organization are trying to use, a grassroots movement in order to start to get more people civically engaged and responsible in the municipal governance. And so you're trying to educate people on the role of municipal councillors, how to run for council. And I think these are all extremely commendable things because it's so important.
Well, it's critically important. There's so many aspects to city council, and it is really very, very close to the people, much, much closer than Ottawa and even the legislature. Because city council deals with, bread and butter kind of issues, potholes, mow the grass, put the stop sign up where it's needed, pick up the garbage, make sure our streets are safe, make sure that there's a fire hole around the corner. I mean, these are basic things that we need every day, and having folks on council who make decisions about those things in concert with their citizens is critically important. And we lost quite a bit of that in Edmonton and, talking to folks around the province, pretty much everywhere. So returning to accountability, I know that's something that's dear to your heart. Returning to accountability is, we believe, critically important. Believing in principle that, and what are you talking about with principles? Well, let's make sure we got solid data and evidence to support the decisions we're making. I mean, we can get into it, but I mean, one of the examples I use in our presentation is a couple of the climate initiatives that we've seen our city council come forward with. One is a fire hall that they built that's got solar panels and it's got geothermal pipelines and wells. It's got insulation, all the rest of it, all designed to be net zero. Well, okay, that's all well and good, but the price of that fire hall is triple what a similar fire hall is in Leduc, where they're not doing all of this stuff. So I guess the question is, okay, you want to spend $16 million in Edmonton. They're doing the same thing for six in Leduc. The difference, what are we achieving with that? Are we actually reducing our carbon output? Okay. How much value does that have? Are we doing it because it's something that's worth doing? Or are we doing it to something to fulfill some sort of a federal initiative to be net zero all over the place? Are we actually making any difference in climate? And if we are, fine, go ahead. But support it with facts, not just not just dreams. And they did the same thing with electric buses. Let's get electric buses. The federal minister of environment wants us all to have electric cars in a few years. So let's get electric buses. Well, okay. If electric buses are the way to go, let's make sure that they work, number one.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that the drivers can drive them, number two. Let's make sure that the company that's building them is viable, number three. Well, there's 0 for 3. They don't work.
Yeah.
The union hates them, and the company went bankrupt. So, those kinds of decisions just are so frustrating to me and to evidently hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of Edmontonians. So let's get that fixed.
Yeah, well, you started talking about how much you can affect change in your local community. I think that's how it started. And then you talked about some of the things that they do. These are, and I want to highlight how important municipal governance is because they're providing, and you went into it, essential services. And I find that a lot of the essential services that we're relying on are neglected by the wayside because council members and mayors are more interested in larger societal issues and not focusing on the critical issues and services that they're supposed to be providing. And
Yeah,
as you were
collecting garbage is not glamorous,
but it's important.
Well, you have a parade because you got the garbage collected on top. Nobody's, cheering because the streets get plowed. Nobody's out there, with banners and fireworks because the boulevards get mowed. I mean, it's basic stuff. And like you say, it's taking forever to get this stuff organized.
Yeah, and I think Canadians are quite generous and proud in certain ways, and I suspect if the city really did a great job, I think they would be applauded. I think that people would recognize it. But right now, we pay such high taxes and everything's in such a poor state that it's actually embarrassing, I think, for everyone involved, for citizens and government officials. We shouldn't be proud of it, and that's why all of this is so dear to my heart, is I think that we can better it for everyone. But it would be like once upon a time we didn't have so many potholes in our streets. I remember those days. But one thing, when you started talking about the net zero fire hall and buses, one thing I thought that is important to highlight is, the public sector uses public money for all these initiatives. And so they have a very large public purse because they're collecting from all of us. And, it's all fine and dandy that they want to, contribute to the net zero initiatives on public money. But I think if you don't see the majority of the public investing in the same infrastructure because it's out of their reach, out of their cost to pay triple on a house, or same thing for a car, perhaps that should be the indication for the public service that it's not time for us to do it until, you see 50% of houses in Edmonton having all the, bells and whistles that one fire station has. Then, okay, society, the public has all come to an agreement that we're there. But how many houses do you see right now that have all the bells and whistles? Probably like 5%, maybe not even.
Edmonton could do something more with solar. I've got a friend whose son has just put solar panels on his house. It cost him about $20,000, had to take out a loan. It's interest free. Figures the payback is going to be 10, 12, 15 years. Who really knows where the price of electricity will go? But,
Yeah.
good. That's great. Carry on. I think that's a worthwhile initiative. But if we're sold on the idea of solar panels by city council as something worthwhile doing and it makes economic sense, I'm with that 100%. But we're told, and we're browbeaten into doing it, and buses and all the rest of it, because of the climate emergency, because of all the forest fires and the floods and the earthquakes and everything else that's going on. And if you raise this, now you're a climate denier. And I said, well, I'm not a climate denier. I'm a government denier. I don't think government is anywhere can do anything about changing the climate. And I also, here I'm not going to veer off and go into my Stephen Gilboa rant. But if Canada as a nation was really serious about doing something about the existential threat from out of control climate, we would be going 24 hours a day, hammer and tong, gung ho on building nuclear plants and exporting LNG. Those two things would do more to reduce carbon outputs than
Yeah.
any number of electric buses on Earth doing that, because they're not serious.
Yeah, and see, there's all these initiatives. I agree with you that can be done, but I think the point that, just on a very basic point, is that the market is dictating to the regular private individuals that they can't afford this. So what makes the public sector think that on behalf of the public that can't afford it for their own houses, where do they get that ownership and responsibility to do it on behalf of the public? And I think that's a conversation we need to start having more of. This is why I think civic engagement is so important. And that's a great question people could be asking their city councilors. Look, I can't afford that in my house. I don't think that the public should have it until we're all comfortable making that kind of financial investment as individuals. Then that should apply to the public sector as well, because they have to be more prudent with public money, and they're just not.
I think that's right. I think, I mean, I was in government for a period of time, and I know that there is a responsibility and a role for government at all levels to look at the big picture, do some long-term planning, and gather the information that may not be available readily to regular folks, and to provide some leadership. I get that, and I'm in favor of that. But when the outcomes are unproven, when the costs are exorbitant and benefits are ephemeral, it's time for someone in a position of leadership to say, hang on a sec, we're not going to do that. Yeah. Instead of doing all that, we're going to go fix some potholes. I mean, that would, I think, would generate a parade and some fireworks and some cheers.
And, I think we're actually saying the same thing in different ways, because what you said, all those provable points, that the market would say, okay, like an example you gave of your friend who put the solar panel up, he made that calculation to say, okay, this is the calculation I'm making. And people are making that calculation. So they're saying, I can't spend 3 times more on my house because the return for me and the environment is not going to be beneficial in the end. So they're not willing to take on that risk. And I think that the public sector, yes, of course, they have to look at big pictures as well and be leaders in certain ways. But you have to also, at the same time, have that conversation back with the citizens. So and what I'm hearing from you is right now it is one-sided. They're telling us this is what we need to do. And it's like everyone is like, well, no, we can't afford it, or it's not in, where is the fact? So that's that conversation that isn't getting the back and forth.
That's right. Now, I mean, we've beaten the climate horse to death here a little bit, but, there's so many other things like safety. I mean, you talk to people about, we had a long conversation with some pals of mine the other day about the lack of interest in going downtown. Everybody used to go downtown. Let's revitalize downtown. Now people are afraid to go out at night downtown. Why? Well, crime, there's homelessness, there's vagrants, there's a sense of unease. So what do you do about that? Well, you need police, and you need some application of careful thought to how you handle and manage those kinds of things. The LRT is an example.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of complaints about the LRT, period, but LRT safety, bus safety. If there's a group in Edmonton called Edmonton Forward, and they are I would call them a political action committee, for lack of a better term, and they are focusing on these kinds of things, neighborhood safety. They make a suggestion that to me seems pretty straightforward, simple, and inexpensive to help reduce uneasiness on the LRT, and that's install turnstiles at the station, so that the people in the stations would actually be commuters and LRT riders as opposed to non-commuters who cause discomfort and unease among the commuters. Now, it would require some expenditure of money, but the payback on something as simple as that would be enormous.
Yeah.
And so, we think that Edmonton Fall is doing a great job. We like what they're doing. They like what we're doing. So that's the kind of initiative that most people are talking about: taxes, safety, bike lanes.
Well, and this is something, I agree. We didn't go really into that, the other issue. But what this makes me think about is I'm wondering how and where things kind of went sideways in cities. And, talking about the turnstile, that's not something, incredibly controversial at all. It's not something, a new initiative. It's been talked about in Edmonton for years. But moreover, like I've had an opportunity to travel around the world, and I was trying to think as you were saying it, where where there wasn't something that made you a turnstile or something to show that you've paid. It just it's almost at this stage a little mind-boggling why we haven't, and whether there's been any discussion as to why we haven't implemented that in Edmonton, especially when we started expanding the LRT system. For a while, it was just a few stops, so it wasn't too much. But
Yeah, there's times, I mean, you asked an important question, what went wrong? Um, I'm not certain what went wrong, but I do know that there's an opportunity to fix it,
yeah,
to go back and relitigate, past elections. I'm not sure how useful that is. I would like to look forward to the next election, and
yeah,
I would like to present Edmonton voters with 13 candidates who subscribe to what PACE believes in: fiscally prudent, business friendly, growth oriented, community focused, practical common sense, 12 councillors, one mayor, and present those ideas on that kind of a slate to Edmonton voters, as opposed to three, four, five, six, seven candidates. They had 27 candidates for mayor in Calgary last time around.
yeah.
I mean, you don't get a sense of who's the best possible person. How can I concentrate my efforts on that kind of a candidate in a free for all that we've got? And so having a political party where candidate A, PACE, candidate B, PACE, candidate for mayor, PACE, now voters will understand, PACE, I know them. Yeah, they're the, fiscally prudent, business friendly, blah, 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 party. So let's go with them. And then the candidate, XYZ, that's the bike lane party. Candidate LMNOP, that's the electric buses party. Who knows? But having a political party in this environment will help voters understand who they're voting for, will help candidates with the machinery required to be a successful politician, will increase voter participation and turnout and engagement through big all-party events to get out the vote exercises that will drive people to the polls, and it'll bring it all out in the open. I mean, you ask, how did we get here? Well, there are candidates who are on our city council, and I believe in other city councils elsewhere, who have been active in, I don't want to sound pejorative, but active in left wing politics, and they see an opportunity. They have lists from their uh, favorite provincial and federal parties. They use those along with their favorite groups involved in the labor market, and they push their candidates forward and they get on city council. And you get what you get. So an opportunity now to bring that out of the here's who we are, here's our donors, here's how we're spending it, here's our principles, here's our candidates. And if everybody does that, it'll be all open and fair, square, all run under a prescribed public set of rules, and the outcome's just got to be pure. Now, if the left or the center or the right or whoever wins, okay, it's democracy. Sometimes you get the result you want, sometimes you don't, but at least it would be public and open and transparent. And in my mind, that's a critical success factor.
Well, I was asking kind of generally what went wrong, and I really appreciate where you went because I think you answered maybe that at the same time because, quite frankly, when I heard that, Alberta was looking to consider political parties at a municipal level, I had mixed feelings. I wanted to hear more about it, what the benefits would be, because there are, of course, concerns with having a party just because it then gets entrenched or something like that. But you went and kind of, I think, in answering what went wrong, you provided so many reasons for why it helps people. Um, you know, I've just started to get more involved in political life, political issues on municipal, provincial, federal, because I think it's important. And it is a bit hard to figure everything out. It's not easy. There's a lot of moving parts all the time. There's all these different actors at play. And, just kind of from my involvement, my observations, I can definitely see the benefit. But one thing I just would like to say, I think until people get more civically engaged, you can have all these nice parties and all these democratic systems, but it doesn't really do much if people just end up sitting at home and perhaps voting on election day. So is there any way that you guys are looking at getting civic engagement back, the spirit of democracy and all of that stuff through PACE, or is it right now, let's just try to get the basics?
Well, we're trying to do both. I mean, you can't do one without the basics. You've got to have a website. You've got to have some, social presence. You got to have a bank account. You got to have a, mail drop. You got to do some posters. You got to do all the regular, day-to-day kind of stuff that any political party does. And when you're starting from zero, you got to also do all the work to establish the framework that that party will operate under. So it's an enormous amount of work. But the civic engagement aspect of it, I was on a bit of a Zoom meeting, sort of a webinar thing last night. There were a couple of people involved. They were involved in, mostly involved in school boards. But they talked about the success they had and how they became successful at the initiative that they were advancing. And it involved hard slugging it out. Talk to your neighbors. Go door to door. Ask some questions. Try to get people to come. Get their names down. Send them an email. Send them another email. And it's work. It's. I was remembering the other day when I ran for a provincial nomination. I had no idea what I was doing. I had spent most of my adult life in the radio and television news business. So I, find myself in a studio with a microphone and a couple of cameramen. I mean, that was my life. And I got exposed to provincial politics and ran for a nomination and trying to find out how that worked. So I went, then he went through the phone book and there was a phone book. And you went through the phone book and you just phoned people in your area and you asked them to buy a membership. And I had a guy working who volunteered with our campaign, a lawyer, a young guy. If I said his name, you'd probably know him. I think he's a judge now, so I won't. But when we got our list and we were all set to go, he said, okay, got the list, get ready, phone everybody and tell them when the nomination meeting is. We went through the list and we phoned everybody. 2 days later, he said, so we phoned everybody? And we all said yes. And he said, phone them again. So we did that. We all went through and everybody phoned them again. And a couple of days later, he said, have you done that? Got everybody phoned? Yes, we have. Phone them again. And it's that kind of engagement that we got, 3, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 people phoning, engaging with the people on the list, encouraging them to come. And, on nomination night, we had about 70% of our members showed up, and about 60% of the opponents' members showed up, and we had about 1,300 votes cast, and I won by 4. So it's that kind of an engagement with volunteers, with commitment, with people who know what they're doing and how this all works that makes, whether it's the River Valley Park, or it's trying to get the right kind of policy in your school, or whether it's getting your pothole fixed, or the LRT with some turnstiles to keep the undesirables out, whatever it is. If people just stay home and grumble about how terrible City Hall is, City Hall will be terrible. If they say City Hall is terrible, let's do something about it, it'll get fixed.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. And I really love your example as well because it shows how much time and effort. And I've said this quote many times. It was something Brian Petford said is democracy is hard, hard, hard work. And yet we often stop trying after our first attempt, saying, okay, done my duty and I'm done. But, when there's issues, we have to address them. We can't just complain about them on the internet, and it's provided such a good um, medium to do so. But then we stop short of actually taking the action. So, like the more I become familiar with the idea of a municipal parties, I think it's a great idea only because it gives people a little bit of and like you don't have to create your website per se. You don't have to do all these things, or I don't even know what the election laws are in terms of municipalities. Maybe we could touch on that just briefly if you're familiar, because federally and provincially it is very restrictive and there's so many rules. So it is nice to have somebody from a party guiding you, I would think. Is there restrictions like that municipally?
Well, we expect there will be some framework
Okay.
of rules around the establishment of political
But
parties.
currently,
Yeah, there's nothing now. We're waiting
nothing.
for the publication of the regulations. But if you look at what's required and involved in setting up a provincial party, it's probably going to be similar. You need a name, and it's got to be approved. You need a bank account. You need an address. You need an executive director. You need a CFO. You need, these kinds of basics. You might have to have a couple of hundred signatures on a petition or an application. I mean, it's not going to be impossible. Then the rules around fundraising will probably mirror what there is provincially. You'll be limited in how much money you can give and how much you can spend. And you expect all of that, and that's the same for everybody. So that's fine. The challenge that we're facing now, they're going through this in Calgary as well, is establishing the little associations that will operate in each ward as I guess analogous to a constituency association in federal and provincial politics. And, we call ours pace setters. And so, we need 12 pace setters in the various wards around the city. I mean, it's a commitment, but you need you and two friends, and you can get started because you need a president, you need a secretary, and you need a treasurer. And once you get those, so you get three guys together. Look at this call. We got two people here already. We could do 2/3 of a pace center organization. So it doesn't take much to get started. But once you're started, then we need somebody to do events, somebody to look after memberships, maybe somebody to go fundraise. Somebody else can help us with a Facebook page. Okay. Now you're building a little organization. And if you got 3, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 people, pretty soon you'll have, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, a couple of hundred members. Now you got some. And now you're going to be involved in selecting your candidate in a nomination process. So you're doing all of the things that will generate the kind of results that you want by inputting some effort and some commitment and some emotion and some art. Maybe $50 or $100 just to cover off a meeting at Tim Hortons or something, and away you go.
Yeah. And municipally, or sorry, what is your status right now? I was at the meeting last week and you mentioned it was informational. So what is it you're trying to accomplish right now with PACE?
Well, right now, we're just a group of people, we're just regular civilians with an idea and an opportunity to do something once the regulations are going forward. So we don't really have any status of any kind right now. Our organization does have an incorporation that allows us to get a bank account so we can pay some bills, and we've had one pretty good sized donation to provide us with seed money. But I was just at the printer today getting some stuff done. That's $1,000. A generous donation doesn't go very far when you're spending $1,000 on a stack of paper to deliver flyers to neighborhoods. So I mean that's where we are. Our next meeting is next week, September 5th, I'll give you the address later, when we sign off. But at that meeting, we're going to urge people to stick their hand up and volunteer to become pace setters. It's critically important.
Right.
Um,
So
and
that's
in October, when the regulations come out, we'll make the application, and then we'll be real.
so I guess that's the question is what is your goal right now? So you're putting these information sessions and then you're recruiting volunteers to get started and learn more and are you starting to talk to other people, do some door knocking, or what is this stage?
There's some people who like what we're doing, who are friends of ours, who are allies, who are talking to candidates and potential candidates about what we're looking for, what's required, how it would all work. We're talking to other like-minded groups. I mentioned Edmonton Forward earlier. There are other people who are plugged into various political machinery and apparatus around Edmonton. We're talking to them. We're talking to people who have experience both on city council and in various elected roles. We're building a team, and the associations are informal at this time. But the people we're talking to say, yeah, we like what you're doing. Yeah, we want to help you. Yeah, okay. And we've got expertise now in Canada. Management, volunteer coordination, data mining, voter identification, publicity, marketing, legislative operations, constituency operations, candidate training, candidate vetting. I mean, that's the kind of machinery that we are building that can lift and support the 13 candidates who subscribe to what it is that we believe philosophically. So as those things move forward towards an election day, 14 months from now, we think we're in pretty good shape and we're pretty happy where we are. But lots to do, lots to do.
Yeah, sounds like it. And 14 months away, it really isn't that long considering. And just curiously, I'm wondering, why is it that you jumped into this? Why did you take on this role, and why is it important to you?
Well, I felt after the last provincial election, given the results of the governing party going zero for however many seats there are, I thought, you know what? If we wait 4 years to another 30-day election campaign without doing anything other than, we're running an election campaign, we're going to get the same result. We need to spend some time explaining to Edmontonians why having electricals, we haven't used the word conservative in anything that we've said about pace, but for the purposes of illustration, having the benefits of having a conservative candidate in your constituency provincially, we've got all kinds of them federally. So why are you voting that way federally but not provincially? What's the difference? How would it benefit you in Edmonton to have a government MLA? And it would. I remember when I was elected in Edmonton, there were two of us. It was me and Nancy Bedkowski. And I'll tell you this quick story about what a government MLA can do. There was some discussion in Edmonton at the time about which overpass should get built first with provincial money. The one up behind the hockey rink at Fort Road, or the intersection of the White Mud and Gateway Calgary Trail Boulevard. Now, I represented the southern constituency, but even if I didn't, it seemed obvious to me that the intersection at the entrance to the city should have a priority. But, the city was looking elsewhere. So I was able, as the member of the legislature from Edmonton Park Island, to walk down the hall to the Minister of Transport and say to him, listen, Al, here's what's going on, and here's what I think you should do. And he said, oh, yeah, okay, we can do that. And he went and told his deputy minister, and so the White Mud Gateway Boulevard intersection got done before the one up north. And, that's not dealing behind the scenes. That's not, manipulating the levers of power. It's having a conversation with a colleague who's in a position to make a decision. And if you
Yep.
don't have that colleague representing you, the next decision is going to get made by somebody else, and you'll have no influence. It's just the way things work.
Well, and it's advocating and being involved. And that's why, to me, these are very basic things. Like, and that's, there was somebody that challenged you that said, oh, you might get pushback. And I think that that's incredibly silly. And I'm getting a little bit tired of that because what you're promoting and what I'm promoting is civic engagement. And that should never be disparaged. If we want to continue in a democracy, we have to continue to encourage civic engagement, continue encouraging conversations with our elected officials. And it's incumbent on us to have those conversations and so that they can then advocate and represent. We need to advocate for ourselves and they represent everyone. And so that this is just a crucial, I think, missing piece in Canada right now.
The initial feedback when Bill 20 was introduced and the notion of political parties was first brought forward, the immediate reaction was, oh, no, we don't want political parties. Oh, there's going to be the leader, and there's going to be all
I kind of thought that.
dedicated and devoted to to the leader, and you're going to ignore what the people want, all the rest of it. Well, no. I mean, we've got political parties federally. We've got political parties provincially. There are political parties operating in municipalities in Montreal, in Vancouver, in every city in the United States, all across Europe. They have political parties. And the individual councillor is responsible to his or her constituents. And that's fundamental. It's right there in our name, accountable. It's one of the failings we've seen in the current council. So if you want to run in the next election as a PACE candidate, you're not going to be devoted and dedicated to PACE. You're going to be accountable to the people in your ward. We'll insist on, we'll demand, and so should you as a voter, as opposed to, well, yeah, you've got objections to the zoning bylaw. Sorry, we're going to go ahead anyway. We don't care. We've made a decision. Come on.
Yeah, no, great points. And like I said, I was a little bit uncertain about it, but you certainly see the benefits. But then, like I said, too, the caution is people need to be engaged with whether it's individually, like this is just an opportunity to make things a little bit easier so that somebody doesn't have to recreate the wheel, I think is the easiest way to do it. There's a party you could get involved and you could always run independently. Like that opportunity is available at any level of government, always.
Of course.
But you made a point that I'd like to just touch on for a second more because I didn't know this and I think it's important. You said that in both Montreal and Vancouver, they already operate in this manner?
That's right. Yeah, there are political parties that operate. I mean, you can find on the internet the breakdown of political parties from the last civic election in Vancouver. The party, coincidentally, it's called ABC in Vancouver, and that party represents the mayor, or the mayor was a representative of that party, and he got elected. And I mean, the world didn't end. People didn't, throw up their hands and gnash their teeth. It's just, well, like I said earlier, it helps the voters understand who's running, helps the candidates get elected, helps the whole process be more public and more transparent. I mean, how could you argue against that?
Yeah, well, again, I think just the argument against it is if we're not involved and then it gets overshadowed by people that are involved. And so it's my continuous plea to people is stop just complaining on the internet and go out and get involved. There's so much that can be done. It's unbelievable. The more I get involved, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about this. So I'm trying to elevate the conversation. And I think we're going to wrap this up relatively soon, unless I can't remember when you needed to leave.
Yeah, my clock is ticking down, but I got a couple more minutes. I wanted to make sure I get a chance to let folks know. I mean, you mentioned a couple of information meetings. You were at one. We've got them scheduled, for the next 6, 8, 10 weeks, all around the city. Here's the next one. It's Thursday, September 5th at 7:30 at the Leafield Community League Hall. Now that's in Mill Woods in the southeast part of our city. The address is 79.
So Doug, but I'm gonna just stop you only because I just do these podcasts once in a while, and I'm not sure when it's gonna come out. So what I'm gonna suggest is do a broader like page for PACE, where they can find you. What are the next steps that you want people? Because I don't know if it'll air before September 5.
Yeah. All right.
Sorry.
Well, just in case it does, the address is
Yes.
910 36th Avenue.
Well, if your website is good, Doug, they'll find it there.
But all of that is on the website. It's pacenow.ca, pacenow.ca. And the notices for the events are posted there. Some background on what we're trying to do is there. Opportunity to donate, opportunity to join the membership, and the rest of the information are to get us started. I had a comment today from someone who saw this and said, your website kind of sucks. Yeah, okay. But we haven't spent 10 grand on a website. We don't have 10 grand to spend on a website. When we do, we might shine it up a little bit. But what we're trying to do is give folks information and a presence. So we're not in a competition for the flashiest golly gee whiz Yahoo website. We're in a competition to change Edmonton City Council for the better.
Yeah, and I'm with you, and I think we'll be expecting more in October once the bill is passed, and you guys have some more information about the structure and how this can take on. When exactly is the election? Municipal election?
It's October 20th, 2025.
Okay.
We expect the regulation. Now, the legislation's already passed. It's just now a matter of gazetting and publishing the regulations, and we expect that to come sometime in October.
Okay. It gives you a year at least to get things rolling.
Yeah.
Anything else in terms of the pace? I have one question I want to ask you about your time in office, but
Fire away.
But in terms of pace, before we turn it that way, or are we?
We're just, trying to get folks to come to information meetings, trying to get the word out. If you have friends that want to come to an information meeting, if you desire to put on a session and you can get, 10, 12, 15, 20 of your friends and rent a hall, or you got a big basement room or a nice big house, we'll come to you. We're eager to spread the word, and it happens, face to face, one by one, over a period of days and weeks and months, and we're willing to invest the time and effort. We just need folks to say, come on over, Doug.
I love it. So yeah, we're going to keep getting people to get involved and excited. I think politics is incredibly interesting and exciting, not the mudslinging part. And I think we could rise above that as long as we start having these conversations more. So the question I wanted to ask you is, you said you were in office in 1989. Was that right?
Yeah.
How do you think, or do you feel things have changed with public elected officials and how they're representing people or had the civic engagement?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I got elected here in Edmonton in 1989. I served one term, and after Ralph Klein became premier, I left. Shortly after that, I got involved federally. A friend of mine, Stockwell Day, became leader of the Canadian Alliance federally, and had a bit of a mutiny there. Needed some help in communications and with the caucus. So I went to Ottawa for a year to work for Stock, and then there was a leadership there, and Stephen Harper came in. So I became his first director of communications. And then I came back, and a little while later, I went to work for Danielle Smith in the legislature, and I wrote question period for her. So I've been, and I, worked a little bit with Mike Nickel when he ran for council and for mayor. So I've sort of been exposed to provincial, federal, and municipal politics, both as a candidate and as a staffer. I've seen a gradual increase in aggressiveness in all fields between political movements and among various candidates. I don't think it serves the public very well, but it has become so competitive and so um, life or death almost, that the notion of, I don't agree with your policy on this. It's not that anymore. It's, I don't agree with your policy on this, and that makes you evil. I'm virtuous. I'm right. I'm on the side of the angels. You are a horrible, evil terrorist, horrible, horrible person. I mean, that's what you're up against. The exposure in the marketplace to voters, uh, or people who imagine that they're going to, change the world, is so negative and so nasty that you now see, people having to be elected politicians with, increasing levels of security. I mean, when I got elected, I was, go to the grocery store, go to the car wash, just, and people would stop you in the street, say hi, Doug. Yeah, people, I think, are reluctant to do that now. Certainly, if you're in a position of some influence, like the premier or a visible cabinet minister, or the mayor. So, encouraging people to run for office is difficult. People ask me all the time, and yeah, okay, and I could see myself on council. I could see myself in the ledge. I could see myself in parliament. I just can't see myself as a candidate. Of course, that's me. Plus, I'm approaching a certain age at which time, most people are long since retired. But I'm having too much fun doing this, so I'm going
I see it. I love the passion. So do you think there's a way to address that or solve it? And maybe my view is a bit naive, but I think it has a lot to do with how the communication is coming from elected officials. We see a lot of disparagement. We see a lot of shutting down conversations. Generally, that comes from one side. And, the other side I find a little bit is, as well, isn't extremely wonderful at engaging either. I feel that there goes back to something we were talking about earlier, that disconnect and having those conversations. I once worked for an MLA, Gene Zwazdowski. I think he came in after you.
Yeah.
And all I remember is that man talking to people all the time. All the time there were people in and out of his office. He was going to events and talking to constituents. And I can't see Gene ever needing security either. But when we are starting to cause this kind of rift and not involving the public that is supposed to be represented into these conversations and discussions, I think that's when the temperature starts rising.
Yeah, I'm going to conclude here. I've got to get going, but we had a young woman at our event the other night, the one that was not the one you were at, but she looked to me to be about 22, 23, that kind of age. And she was saying that to identify amongst her peers as a conservative person was tantamount to being ostracized and banished from the public square. She found it very, very difficult. And the vitriol that you see, the snappy comebacks, the use of social media to be vindictive, I think is, you don't get that from 75, 80-year-olds like me. You get that from, younger folks.
Yeah.
I don't want to assign blame, but it's the kind of environment that it really does need to be addressed. And maybe those of us who have, kids and grandkids that age can do something to, raise the level of a discussion into a friendly, meaningful, fruitful, data-driven debate, as opposed to an argument that results in people yelling at each other.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to see where PACE goes, and maybe you will get involved. We'll see outside of the inner group. But I think it's so incredibly important, and I'm glad people are taking initiative, because that's all it takes. It takes a little bit of coordination and some passion and willpower, maybe.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate the opportunity to share what it is that we're doing with your audience.
My pleasure. We'll see you again, I hope. Take care, Doug.
Adios.